Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do have another twist in the NRL expansion saga. Of course, this year we have just had so many stories about what the next few teams will be. You don't know what to believe. And the NRL has now come out in the past couple of days and said the Western Bears bid is not happening. Of course, this is the proposed relocation of the North Sydney Bears over to Perth. They would be coming in the year 2027. It was reported that this deal was done and that the Bears would be coming in 2027. It was reported that they did win the bid over the Newtown Jets, which also were negotiating with people over in Western Australia about becoming that face of the relocated franchise. It was reported they went with the Bears. It was set to be announced after the grand final. But Peter V'landys has now come out and said, we are not doing this. We're not happy with the bid. Apparently the NRL is feeling like they were lowballed when it comes to the license fee. Apparently the Bears and this new entity didn't want to pay a license fee, which usually you do see expansion clubs paying a license fee. It does get distributed to either the NRL or the other clubs in the competition. But the NRL feeling like they are being lowballed in this situation. And it does now beg the question, are the Bears dead in terms of ever getting back into the NRL? Of course, they were for a long time talking about relocating to the Central Coast in Gosford, but you would think there's probably a reluctance from the NRL to have another Sydney team. And really in the past 4 or 5 years, they have set their sights on Perth for a relocation and ultimately a reintroduction into the NRL. It does now appear that that is dead. And now you'd have to say you would be very surprised if we do see a Bears franchise back in the NRL. However, the NRL still apparently keen to go to Perth for one of the next couple of teams. They are talking about going to 20 teams. And we have seen the NRL coming out and saying that they will still deal with the West Australian government to try and resuscitate the bid. They're saying that any bid cannot take the expansion process for granted. Peter V'landys saying, I have made this clear from day one. We will only expand if there is a firm business case, and at the moment Perth's business case doesn't stack up. If we can't stack it up, I can't take it to the members for consideration. And he also said their bid is extremely short. We will be having more talks with the WA government, but not necessarily the current consortium. So it is interesting to say there's no real business case for Perth, but they're saying this PNG bid, which apparently is reported to have been agreed upon for what we thought was the 19th team coming in 2028. Maybe now that will be the 18th team if they can't get a Perth-based team up and running by 2028. They're saying there is a business case for that. Obviously, we do have the $600 million cash injection from the Australian federal government. The NRL team in PNG is seen as a sort of diplomatic strategy to bring Papua New Guinea closer to the West and to slow down the influence of China in the area. They do go in there, China, and build a lot of infrastructure. You do see roads, airports, hotels all getting set up, and then the Chinese companies go in there, set up their mines and sell the resources and send the money back to China. And obviously with Papua New Guinea being such a rugby league heartland, the Australian government is looking at this and saying we're going in there and winning over the hearts and minds of the Papua New Guinean people with rugby league and their own team in the NRL. But of course, you'd have to ask the question, how much of a commercial benefit is there going to be from setting this team up? Obviously, it doesn't really help the ratings in Australia. You also probably don't have a lot of sponsors who are willing to pay big dollars to get their brand out there in PNG because it is such a low income area. The residents there don't have a lot of disposable income. So you don't really get the bang for your buck as a sponsor as opposed to sponsoring an Australian or a New Zealand team. But of course, there's no federal funding or no significant federal funding for the WA bid. And that's why the NRL is saying it doesn't stack up at this point. And they are now suspecting that the NRL will look to set up its own team in Perth. Basically, this is similar to the GWS Gold Coast Suns model in the AFL, where the AFL goes in, they are the owners and effectively the operators of the team. There's no bid process. They just say we are putting a team in this location, and then they go out and hire a CEO, they go and hire a coach and a board and all the rest of it. And we have got the Sydney Morning Herald reporting that the NRL making it clear that any new Perth team will still have to have a link with the North Sydney Bears, whether that be the name, whether that be the colours. But if they're rejecting this bid, you have to wonder whether the Bears will let the NRL take their identity and transplant it into Perth if they don't have the ultimate control over the team and also the operations of the club. The WA Premier Roger Cook saying that we still want a team in WA. It is the obvious choice for a new NRL team, and the NRL knows WA is a great option for the league's expansion. We offer significant broadcasting opportunities that are unmatched by the other bids, and a Perth team would be ready to go for the 2027 season. That is true. It is the obvious choice for the NRL. Obviously, it is the fourth biggest city in Australia. While it is not a rugby league heartland, you do have a lot of New Zealanders, you do have a lot of English people there, also South Africans as well. Even though they would probably be more inclined to support rugby union, they might be able to win over a few of them with a Perth-based team. Roger Cook saying that the state government wasn't involved in the Western Bears bid, but they had played a supporting role to work with the NRL on grounds, high-performance facilities, and a player development program in schools. The team was set to play at HBF Park in Perth. It also was reported that that ground would be getting a multi-million-dollar renovation, an upgrade to one of the grandstands. I would assume any NRL team would still be playing there. That probably means the renovation does go ahead. But it's so hard to know what to believe with this whole NRL expansion process. First, we did have the reports earlier in the year about PNG being done. Then it was reported that they had gone cold on the idea of PNG. And then it came out that the Western Bears bid was successful. And now we're getting the confirmation from the NRL that it is not successful. From the outside looking in, it does seem like a bit of a mess. They're also now saying PNG apparently a done deal for 2028. That is coming from outside of the NRL. It's just coming from media reports. The PNG Prime Minister was at the grand final on the weekend. He did say things are going pretty well at this stage, but there is a few things to work through. And we do also have the other options. You do have Christchurch in New Zealand in the South Island with their new 30k stadium with the translucent roof, state-of-the-art facility. That has been talked about as an expansion opportunity for the NRL. You did have the Southern Kia bid. There is also a few other bids coming out of the South Island. There has been talk maybe about a Wellington team, rugby league potentially a bit better supported on the North Island of New Zealand, but then you ask the question, would you be infringing on the Warriors there? And obviously the Christchurch Stadium situation a lot better for rugby league than Sky Stadium in Wellington. You do also have Adelaide. I do think that is a good option. They need to attack the AFL. They need to get behind the Barassi line. That hasn't really been talked about as a serious expansion candidate. Maybe it is a relocation candidate for one of the Sydney clubs if they would go. There has been a lot of talk for a long time about the Sharks maybe being the likely relocation candidate in Sydney. I do think that is a fair way off ever happening, and obviously it would be opposed by the Sharks fans in Sydney. And of course there is also the option of a third Brisbane team or another Queensland team like an Ipswich, like a Toowoomba in central Queensland, something like that. It's always an option. So really hard to know which way the NRL will ultimately go with these next three expansion clubs. They have said we do want to get to 20 teams in the next 10 years. So we will wait and see what happens with this NRL expansion to Perth, whether they go with the Bears, whether they go with a new team. But as it stands, this bid by the Western Bears and the WA-based consortium has been rejected by the NRL. They are saying, you're lowballing us, you're not paying enough for a license fee, and the NRL ultimately very insulted and offended by this bid. We'll have to wait and see whether they set up their own team or they tender the license out to a broader variety of bidders and maybe some other locations. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.